The iPhone SE has made a splash. It's the $400 new iPhone. And by now, I'm sure you know that this is, pretty great value for a phone. But I wanted to put it to the test. So I took my SIM card out of my 11 Pro, so nice, and put it into the iPhone SE. And I've been using it since it came out. And interestingly enough, I'm not missing that much. There's really like three main things here that are different from the flagship iPhones: the design, the performance, and the camera. And the design is probably the biggest because it's the first thing that you see. This is an older design of an iPhone and it's kind of being phased out. I wouldn't be surprised if the iPhone SE is the last version of an iPhone with a home button. But there's, a lot of charm with that design. It is what we were used to since the original iPhone. So going back to it, although it did take a little bit of getting used to kind of use the home button again and not use gestures, it felt very familiar and I'm totally used to it at this point. I think the iPhone SE, the first version, and now this version kind of has two camps. It's for people that really want an affordable iPhone, and the SE definitely does that, and for people who want a small phone. Now that's where I was a little iffy. I'm personally in the camp that wants a small phone. We covered the original iPhone SE and I really loved it. And on paper, this 2020 SE is not that much different from the iPhone 11 Pro. The size of the actual hardware is basically the same. But what you're getting here is thinness and a smaller screen. So even though those top and bottom bezels might not look all that good, that screen is actually, I found, more usable. It makes it feel like the phone is smaller. I think, it's a decent screen. I definitely noticed the fuzziness of it not being a super high resolution OLED display, but in day-to-day, it's really not a big deal at all. That in combination with the thinness, which I've forgotten how much I actually like a really thin phone. And you really kind of forget that Apple has made the latest iPhones really chunky, and that's great for a lot of things, but it's kind of nice to hold a really thin, sleek phone again. So it's not as small as the original SE, of course, but in the hand, it actually does feel quite a bit smaller than current flagship phones. But overall, that size of the screen and the size of the overall hardware, it actually does feel like the smaller phone I was hoping for. Do I wish it was a little smaller? Yes, but I can still say this is the small, quote-unquote, iPhone. By the way, did you know that we have a podcast and we actually talked a lot more in depth about the iPhone SE and what it's like to actually use on our latest episode? It's called the Apple Circle Podcast. Surprise. It is linked down below. Be sure to check it out. Give it a listen, and we think you'll really enjoy it. Now, the home button was actually the one thing I was looking forward to, and not because I want to go back to the home button, but because of Touch ID. And normally I wouldn't really care, but in the situation we're in the world right now, when you're wearing a mask, Face ID just kind of sucks. You just have to enter your passcode, which at that point, why even have biometrics? So having Touch ID has been a really nice thing. Whenever I'm out of the house and I'm wearing a mask, Touch ID is coming in handy. And it's the same Touch ID that you have come to expect from a hardware fingerprint sensor. It works great, it's fast, and right now I'm loving it. If the situations were different and I didn't have to wear a mask, I don't think I would really enjoy it quite as much, but it's a give and take. Face ID and Touch ID are both great biometric options, but right now, I'm definitely enjoying having Touch ID. So the camera on the iPhone SE is the one thing I was a little bit worried about because that's one of the main things I look for in a phone. It's the reason why I'm using the 11 Pro instead of just the regular 11. It's the reason why I always get that top tier. It's for that camera. And the iPhone SE is now confirmed it has the exact same hardware as the iPhone 8. So the same sensor, the same lens, but it has the updated processing from the A13. And that does make a huge difference. So when you have good lighting and you have both cameras next to each other, honestly, you're hard pressed to tell a difference. They both do a great job. But it's when you get into those less ideal situations where you can see a difference. And I think the biggest one is no night mode. I didn't realize how much I actually use night mode and appreciate night mode because it's so seamless on the higher end iPhone 11 and 11 Pro. It just works really well. And there is a huge difference between the iPhone SE and the iPhone 11. Video, on the other hand, is excellent. And I can say it by far, it's the best video you can get on a phone of this price. And it competes with even flagship phones. It is that good. And if you want options, you get up to 4K 60, you get different frame rates. I mean, everything you would want from a phone camera for video, the iPhone SE pretty much nails. So it's really give and take with this camera system. It's not the best, but it does some things really well. I'm not missing having those different camera options as much as I thought I would because the camera performs pretty well. Now, one area where I am missing is battery life, and it's no real surprise here because the internal battery is less than 2,000 milliamp hours, which is tiny for today's phones. We have phones with 5,000 milliamp hour batteries. It's a big difference. And that's one of the things that the iPhone 11 and 11 Pro are touted for. Excellent battery life. Now, I don't want to say that the battery life on the SE is the worst I've ever experienced. It can still get you through a day, but this is where you notice that this is older hardware with kind of a turbocharge of a great processor. So when you're doing day-to-day tasks like Twitter, web browsing, Instagram, all that kind of stuff, the phone, it'll last you quite a good amount of time, almost all day. And that's where I think you see the power efficiencies of the A13. But then when you want to do something intensive, like a game or edit a photo or something that actually hits the processor, you can almost see the battery dip percentage by percentage. It's almost, like I said, you put a turbocharger on your car. Yeah, you're gonna go faster, but it's gonna use a lot more gas. But as an average, I've found I'm getting about a little bit more than 4 hours of screen on time. So it's definitely worse than what I'm used to from the bigger flagship phones, which is again to be expected, but it's not completely unusable. There's a lot of talk going on about the battery life on this phone not being good, and it's not. But it is completely usable. I can still use it throughout the day, but I've had to go back to the mentality of if I can charge it or have an opportunity to, I will. And that's something I haven't had to do in a long time, but using a phone with a small battery will give you that. But besides battery life, that A13 is great. It is as fast as you would want an iPhone to be because it's that latest processor. There have been some reports of it clocking differently. Maybe it's because it has 3 gigabytes of RAM, but really in day-to-day use, this phone is fast, it's snappy, it's what you expect from an iPhone, and most importantly, to me at least, is that you get those updates for presumably 5 years from now. This is obviously not a perfect phone, and I don't think anyone ever claimed it was. And for who it's marketed to, I think this is a great option. Of course, for someone like me, I am used to using the newer phone, so going back, there are things I'm going to miss. But if you're coming from a lesser phone, like an iPhone 7, iPhone 6S, or even 6, this is going to be a great iPhone, and even more importantly, you're getting a great deal on it. But I think what I've really learned here is the Apple ecosystem is strong, and whether or not you're paying for the $400 phone or the $1,200 phone, you're getting a great experience across the board. And after a week of using the iPhone SE as my main phone, I'm not really missing all that much.